You are listening to Nate the Hate on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, and I am joined by my co-hosting mate, MVG.
What's up, Nate? Great to be here.
Great to have you, and today we are going to give some of our predictions and expectations from Sony's PlayStation 5 event that is coming later this month, and it is poised to be a very exciting and good show for both the industry and for consumers, so let's get right into it. Let's put this out here first. At the Sony event for the PlayStation 5, we are not going to get a price, nor are we going to get a release date from Sony. This is going to be strictly a software-oriented show, and we're going to see software from Sony's first-party publishers and third-party partners, and that's where we'll start. We'll start with what we expect to see from third-party partners at the PlayStation 5 showcase.
Well, let me stop you right there for a sec. So, is this a response to Microsoft's gameplay presentation? Like a direct response to that, or do you think this is just a part of Sony's kind of strategy going forward for the PS5, which we have talked about before? We said that, once Ghost of Tsushima and The Last of Us 2 were pretty much, out the door, which is, very, very soon now, that their focus would shift to the PS5.
I don't think this event is a direct response to Microsoft's May Inside Xbox event. I think Sony's response to that would have been the Unreal Engine 5 demonstration, where they went out of their way to market and make a deal with Epic to highlight that next-gen engine of Unreal Engine 5. They got to showcase that tech demo of what next-gen can truly offer, whereas Microsoft showed us that range of indie titles that are coming to the Xbox Series X, and some will come into the PlayStation 5, but it didn't really capture the feel of what we should expect from next gen, whereas Sony really went right to it of saying, this is what next gen can deliver in terms of visual fidelity. This event feels more like Sony's typical marketing plan. This is coming in June, where we typically see E3, but with E3 canceled and Sony foregoing it for a second year, this seems like the already calculated effort that Sony was going to have in June, regardless of what Microsoft did, the month prior.
Right. So I've got a whole bunch of notes written for this. I've come prepared with my list of scribble on a piece of paper. But I guess my first question, Nate, is: will we see the console? Will we actually see? Ooh. And if we do see the console, will we see a render of the console, or will we see Sony come out with the system in his hands, or if we see Jim Ryan come out holding the system in his hands? What are we going to see here?
I can see them opening the show with either Jim Ryan walking out or Mark Cerny and having the system on, that pillar like we typically see at some of the E3 conferences. Because when I think back to the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, reveals, you had the companies actually make snide comments to each other of, how do you have a hardware event, but not show the hardware? So it feels like it'd be a marketing misstep not to come out and have the controller leaning up against the box. And we also saw Nintendo with the Wii U, where they had that reveal trailer, and the Wii U was just this box hidden in the corner. They never really showed it. They focused on the controller itself, and for some reason that caused marketing confusion. So it'd be easy for Sony just to come out, show the box on a pillar leaning up against a stand, saying this is the PlayStation 5, and then just move off the hardware altogether and get right back into the software and show us what really matters. Because at the end of the day, the box is the box.
How do you think they pivot from the hardware and showing it, maybe going into some of the features that it provides, straight into games without talking about price?
You do it in the typical Sony masterful marketing fashion of, here's the PlayStation 5. We will discuss pricing and release date later this summer. Today, we just want to talk to you about the games coming to our exciting new platform. And we're going to begin today's demonstration with our first game. Here, have a look. And once you finish that type of sentence, especially in the way Sony delivers it, as long as it's not Mark Cerny, people are going to accept it, because they're going to be like, okay, Sony is serious. They're ready to show us those games. And people are more than willing to wait, a few weeks or a few months for the pricing and even release date, because we're figuring the PlayStation 5 is going to launch in November, which means Sony really doesn't have to date or price this until August or even September, where we have heard or seen the rumors that there's expected to be a Sony State of Play around that time. And that's the perfect time for Sony to really come out, date, price it, show us more of the launch games. And they have that really exciting momentum leading into launch. Kind of what we saw Nintendo do with the Switch. Nintendo unveiled the Switch in a trailer in October. We had the conference in January and it launched in March. That is such a tight turnaround, but the hype and the excitement was always at a high because it was like, okay, that trailer was awesome. Okay, now it's January. We see all the games. Wow, it's launching in 6 weeks. And if Sony can kind of replicate that with the PlayStation 5's marketing, I would say they're in a really strong position. And, it really begins this month with the PlayStation 5 software event to build that hype. Sell us on that software right now, because when it comes time to buy the hardware, it's not about what the box looks like. It's about the games it plays. And that's always Sony's focus.
So Sony presentations, they always have massive hype before they actually begin. And when they occur, I'm not saying every single time, but most of the time, they're a little disappointing. Let's be honest, right? Like, is this one going to be that, or do you think there's genuine hype? And I guess my follow-up question is, do you think they're going to focus too much time on some features like the UI, where they spend literally 20 minutes discussing the UI features? Because I think showing you the UI is a part of the show, and it's an important part. People want to see what the new functionality looks like. I think they want to see how snappy the new user interface will be. A lot of criticisms about how slow the PS4 one is, especially when it gets loaded full of icons on the screen. So do you think they're going to show the UI as well? And if so, do you think they're going to focus a lot of their time on that? I kind of get the feeling that Sony may get on a bit of a tangent and spend a little bit too much time on the UI side and then leave literally the last 30 minutes for the games. After, of course, they've opened up with, the first kind of trailer, which hopefully will be something that really gets people excited, which I think it will.
I'm not sure if we see the UI get a deep dive at this event per se, because everything I've heard from some of my colleagues within the industry is that this is a software showcase. So to me, that kind of negates the possibility of an overload of UI and some of the system features. I think the UI could be something that maybe we see them detail further on the PlayStation blog, potentially the same day, with like a YouTube video that goes into a real deep dive of it, of all of the system features, the general look. We might see the brief introduction where they show us the quick transition from game to game, like we saw Microsoft do with the Xbox Series X, where they went from like State of Decay 2 to Gears of War in 2 seconds. I could see Sony demonstrate that. Maybe that's how they switch from game to game during the presentation itself, of saying, hey, here's game 1 that we're showcasing, and now all of a sudden you transition into game 2 and you say, we're doing this live on PlayStation 5 hardware to show you how fast and seamless this can be. That could be a cool demonstration to show you the quickness of the system and how it utilizes the SSD. But I mean, that might be too ambitious for such a project, especially since, we're expecting a lot of trailers and not actual live gameplay demonstrations per se of being played on the PlayStation 5 hardware right before us. But I wouldn't expect too much of the UI at this event, but I do expect them to at least show it to some capacity and introduce us to it. But I think we'll get further information after the event, potentially the same day.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point that you make. I kind of feel like they'll maybe tell us a little bit more about the UI than what we think. But again, I have no idea. I just feel like, look, this is an hour-long presentation, right? So an hour long just to go through games seems like there's a lot there. Like Microsoft's games presentation was, I think was it 35 minutes in total? And
yeah, roughly.
And I know Microsoft's one was quite disappointing, but even that felt like it kind of dragged on a little bit, especially because there wasn't really anything, that really knocked it out of the park then. And this is going to be a completely different show, but 1 hour, I mean, what do they open up with here? What's the game that really gets people excited about the next generation? I think, I think, and I've got my list here, I think that they open up with Horizon Zero Dawn 2 as the big heavy hitter game that's going to launch with the system. It's going to be, they're going to show the trailer for Horizon, they're going to show some gameplay, and it's going to say available at launch, and then that's when they're going to go into the hardware discussion briefly, as you mentioned, and then into the UI, and then pivot back into more games after that. What do you think they open up with?
I think they're definitely going to open with a first-party title. I think we're going to see them open with BluePoint's game, which is heavily rumored, and it's something I have heard myself, is that it's going to be a Demon's Souls remaster. I think they open with that because you're going to want to demonstrate something that is going to be a visual showcase. And I think Demon's Souls is going to be that title. They also have to deviate a little bit from what we know of the PlayStation 3 original. I mean, the Dark Souls franchise or genre has evolved a lot over the years. I would say it reached its pinnacle with Bloodborne.
Yes.
And to return to Demon's Souls, a game that's now probably by definition, I would say archaic in terms of design, really needs this remake where it addresses the gameplay and even the general composition of the world itself to be, more fitted for the modern era. And if you can demonstrate that with breathtaking visuals, that's how I would open. You show me BluePoint's game, if it is Demon's Souls, you show that, it gets people excited. I understand that it's still a niche genre overall, but you show that's like, wow, okay, they're coming out strong with that core focus in terms of games, and you get people excited. And now you end the Demon's Souls trailer with launch day. People sit there and say, okay, Sony's coming here aggressive, and they're bringing something around. They're coming with something big. Then you transition into the Jim Ryan, Mark Cerny sitting there saying, well, would you look at that? Demon's Souls is coming back to the PlayStation 5 exclusively later this year on launch day. Now take a look at our hardware, show the UI really quick, saying here's our second game that we're going to be showcasing today. Enjoy the rest of the show. Right. Second game comes up, be it third party or first party game, and we just flow for the hour. Because one thing that Sony does well at these demonstrations, or these presentations, I should say, is that when they really have a game they want to focus on, and I'll use Horizon Zero Dawn 2 as the example because Guerrilla is always a focal point at new hardware for Sony. We saw it with Killzone 2 on the PlayStation 3. And with PlayStation 4, we saw Killzone Shadowfall. So I do think Horizon would fill the role this time for PlayStation 5, is they're going to give us a 10-minute demonstration. They're going to show a in-game engine or maybe even gameplay of a sequence play out. Like Killzone Shadowfall, we saw the forest. Right. We saw that city environment. We saw all that really made you say, we are arriving in next gen. So now if you can show me this vast open world with dinosaurs and alloy hunting, and there's no pop-in, and I see this vast landscape, and you show me 10, 15 minutes of gameplay with that, that's hype. And that's how you come to introduce us to your next gen hardware.
I mean, that's very compelling, no doubt. I had BluePoint, their game, down as a potential intro as well. I think it's one of those two games. I feel like it's going to be Horizon. I don't know why I picked it over the BluePoint game. I just feel like we're if we're going for, we're Sony and we want to come out and we want to hit you with the hardest haymaker we can. I think it's got to be the Horizon game. The BluePoint, the Demon's Souls. I mean, don't get me wrong. That's a haymaker as well for all the reasons you said. And maybe you're right. Maybe Horizon is more of a here's the trailer, and now we're gonna run through 10 minutes of gameplay. With someone on stage, running through a side mission or something. I think that's pretty big too. If they can show off the performance, the SSD, the in and out type of stuff, I think that would be really cool. But I think we both agree that once they've kind of showed off the hardware, then it's back to games, and I would imagine from there they pivot into the third party stuff, right? Well, I mean, what do you think it goes from there? I kind of see them maybe talking about EA or Activision or Ubisoft, at that point? Where do you see it kind of going from there?
Yeah, I could see them definitely pivot to an EA or an Activision or the Ubisoft, because after I introduce you to my hardware, I'm definitely going back to the software, but I probably want to go to a third-party developer who's using the DualSense controller in a unique way. So let's say the next game is Call of Duty from Activision.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, well, using the DualSense, you can use the touchpad to, bring up this command or the map system or something like that. And we'll probably get another 10-minute gameplay demonstration from something like a Call of Duty, because Call of Duty's always been a major player at Sony's E3s for the last several years.
Yes.
They show us that first level of the campaign, and then they tell us, oh, the multiplayer map pack is PlayStation exclusive for the first 6 months or however long the deal normally lasts. So I could see them doing that. EA, I could see them definitely bringing a FIFA, maybe a Madden demonstration.
Yeah, I've got FIFA 21. I think that will be featured at this event. Something new that they'll show off with ray tracing and some really cool effects.
Right. Yeah. If you come out with FIFA, they sometimes do that in-engine type of gameplay trailer, where they'll highlight those things like the ray tracing, where they'll show all the lighting effects and the distortion of light rays coming through the raindrops, or how it reflects off the snow to create that extra illumination. Because that's typical that we see of EA marketing flair. They like to overhype and oversell some of these aspects, and then when we actually play the game, it's nowhere near that level of detail. But that's just classic EA. So I definitely see them pivoting into their third-party selection, or maybe even a little bit into some of the more marquee indie games, like from the studio House Marquee.
Okay.
Who we've had the Super Stardust series on the PlayStation line for several years. It's always a fun game.
Yep.
Though we did have Resogun at launch of the PlayStation 4, which I had a lot of fun with that game. It's one of the few PlayStation 4 games I platinumed.
Mm-hmm.
And if they came to that with the PlayStation 5 with a Resogun or a new Super Stardust, I'd be all about it. I know, House Marquee, they're good with those arcade games. I know they have kind of said that the arcade genre is dying for platforms, but I hope they do return to those roots and have something ready at launch for the PlayStation 5, because they're one of those companies I really look to for that just pure unadulterated fun on a Sony platform.
Yeah.
And if they came with a new Super Stardust with some ray tracing, SSD, and all this visual flair, and maybe it supports VR again, because they did have Super Stardust VR on the PlayStation 4, and they have that on the PS5. That would be a lot of fun to see too as a demonstration. But that's something like kind of for a sizzle reel. You run through a bunch of games really quick.
Yeah, I got like an indie section kind of noted here, and I guess in some ways, I mean, it's not necessarily indies, but it's kind of those smaller bite-sized sizzle reel games that we expect. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of those games, I think, that will get shown at this event. So I think, the next Super Stardust iteration kind of makes sense, or Resogun 2. I mean, I could see that. I mean, having those smaller games available at launch, I think is very important to the PlayStation brand. They've done that for a while. I think that's definitely going to continue. Now, you mentioned VR. I don't think there's going to be VR at this event, but do you think they're going to, maybe, like you said with the prize, they're going to say, later on this summer, we will, talk about our virtual reality plans for the PS5?
Yes, I think they would fully detail it later in the year, but I do think we get some sort of mention of it, be it in the form of this title is coming to us. It's going to support VR. It will support VR on the PlayStation 5. We're just not ready to discuss our headset plans. But, as we already detailed, PlayStation VR on the current iteration will be compatible with PlayStation 5. So, it's still part of our focus. But we'll talk about PlayStation VR Part 2 later this year, where we'll give our pricing, launch details, and show you how VR will be played. But, I mean, I wouldn't put it past them to give us just some sort of teaser trailer, especially if the PlayStation VR 2 is completely wireless.
Yeah.
And, addresses all of the main problems that we had with the first edition of, we're stuck being wired to a additional box. It was convoluted. It was complex to set up. It wasn't very space friendly if you wanted to leave it plugged in all the time.
Yeah.
So I could see them just doing a quick trailer of like, hey, we know what you want, but we're going to talk about it a little later.
Yeah, I could
But,
see. Yeah, I could definitely see that kind of trailer where they maybe show a silhouette of the next PSVR 2 or something, and then they tease it, but they don't really show anything more at that point. So for the third-party games, we talked about EA, FIFA, Madden potentially, maybe some of the marquees. What about Ubisoft? Now, I've got something crazy here. I think they're going to show the next Assassin's Creed game, but with gameplay. There's going to be someone on stage running through a mission on stage to really just sink the boots into Microsoft and say, this is how you do gameplay, Microsoft, and we've got it on stage on the PS5 running at 60 frames, not 60 frames, at 30 frames per second, but this is the actual gameplay. What do you think?
I'm not expecting to see Assassin's Creed Valhalla at the Sony event. I do think Microsoft has secured that marketing exclusively because we saw that. I believe Microsoft had the marketing for Assassin's Creed Odyssey as well.
Yes.
So I think Microsoft has probably stepped forward and made sure next time you see this game, it's it's on our terms. Because otherwise that looks really bad for Microsoft to say, we're going to show you the first gameplay of Assassin's Creed, and you show us an in-engine demonstration of the game, and then Sony comes out a month later and shows you full gameplay. Because, I mean, if I'm Microsoft, I'd look at Ubisoft and be like, thanks, you made us look like, fools. But I do think if Ubisoft is at Sony's event, and they should be, I'm hoping we see something a little bigger, though realistically, we're probably going to see Watch Dogs.
Yeah, Watch Dogs Legion, right? The one that's kind of been in development hell for the last 3 years or so.
Yes, that's unfortunately what I would expect from Ubisoft at Sony's event, though my heart tells me let them come with a brand new Splinter Cell game.
That would be... Now, if you want hype, that would be a hype announcement. But
yes, that would send trembles through the industry if you showed a true next-gen Splinter Cell game, because we haven't had one since, the early Wii U, late PS3 with... the
Wii U with Conviction, is that it?
Not Convictions, the sequel to Conviction. The name... I don't recall the name right now, but Blacklist.
Blacklist, that's right, yeah.
That's it. It was a good game, but we haven't seen one since then. So we're going on what now? 7 years or so without a Splinter Cell game, and what a better time to reintroduce the series than with the genesis of the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and us transitioning into the next gen. And what a better, platform to do it than the PlayStation 5 software showcase.
Well, Sony's notorious for this, right? I mean, they do those teasers and then they'll say 2022 or 2021. So I mean, I could definitely see something like that happen where they secure a really hype announcement, but by the way, the game's coming out 2 years from now type of thing, because they've done that before.
Yes, I mean, we're definitely going to see a number of those, because we touched on this on the Spawncast very briefly, but I am an advocate that we will see Sony's licensed version of Silent Hill at the event.
So let's talk about this. So tell me about where this kind of all started, this discussion, because I kind of felt like this Dead by Daylight announcement that recently was made was what everyone... I mean, that was what this was going to be, and I just kind of felt like maybe there is a Silent Hill game, but to me it doesn't feel like it's a part of this event. And I'm not saying there isn't one in development, but it just feels like that this doesn't feel like the right event for a Silent Hill announcement. But again, I'm just speculating. So what are your thoughts on this?
I do expect to see Silent Hill at this event. I feel like the marketing of the Silent Hill in the Dead by Daylight was that preemptive tease, if you will. I mean, if Nintendo fans want to take a Metroid helmet or a Samus helmet in the Paper Mario teaser trailer to be a hint of something Metroid has to be around the corner, then I would definitely look to the Dead by Daylight Silent Hill editions as Konami preparing people for the return of the Silent Hill franchise. And I mean, the rumors have been going around for a while now. If people really had been paying attention, there actually the talks have been going on for almost 2 years. But the level of discussion has changed depending on the rumors you pay attention to, because we've seen the rumors that said that Konami was trying to get Kojima back to finish Silent Hills, whereas another rumor was that Sony was buying the Silent Hill IP from Konami. And I mean, if we think even more years back, there was that rumor that Microsoft was buying the Silent Hill IP from Konami for like $2 billion. And I mean, that was nonsense. But the idea of Sony licensing the Silent Hill IP from Konami and choosing the Siren development team, which is made up largely of Team Silent or former Team Silent employees.
Yes.
It makes such perfect sense because we haven't seen a Siren game in a number of years, and it's a horror franchise I love to play on the PlayStation 3. I really enjoyed that game. It was creepy. It was atmospheric. Now you let them come back to Silent Hill. You let them basically reboot the franchise as a PlayStation exclusive.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, the game's not coming anytime soon. This game likely won't release until late 2021, even 2022. But that's the type of trailer you show for a few seconds and you play that eerie music that symbolizes Silent Hill. And all you have to really do is show the main character, what's his name? Ethan.
Yeah.
You show him turn around on the street.
Is this a reboot of the first Silent Hill game, or is what kind of game is this?
I believe it's a reboot of the franchise itself.
Okay, so they're starting from the beginning.
Yeah, kind of like Shattered Memories was supposed to be a remake of the first Silent Hill game.
Right.
Unfortunately, it didn't sell all that well. I mean, it came out on the Switch. It later came to the PlayStation 2 and PSP, and it was a fantastic game. Just nobody bought it. So now you reboot the franchise under, former Team Silent employees' guidance with Sony money on the PlayStation 5. You really just need a 30-second teaser trailer. Yeah. Even if it says 2022 at the end of it, people are going to get hyped because we've been waiting for a good Silent Hill game for years. I mean, Konami really treated the franchise poorly after, Shattered Memories is a good Silent Hill game, but we had to suffer through, was it Downpour?
Yeah.
Homecoming.
Yeah.
Those weren't good Silent Hill games. And then you had the one on the PlayStation Vita. It was like the over-the-top dungeon crawler.
I never played those games. Honestly, Downpour was okay, but like after Silent Hill 4, I kind of just stopped playing.
Yeah, and then we finally got that glimmer of hope where we had Norman Reedus appear in the PT demo and say, "This is Silent Hills," and it was like, "Oh my God, the franchise is back." And then all hell broke loose with Kojima's exodus and removal from Konami, and that project was canceled. So now it's time for Silent Hill to come back, and under Sony's guidance, I think it can come back in a big way. And this is the time to do it in that classic Sony fashion of teasing us with a game that's 2 years out with a 30-second trailer, but people will buy the hardware today or at launch because they say, "I can't wait to play Silent Hill in 2 years." Just like some people bought a PlayStation 4 to play PT, a game that was never to be.
Yep. Okay, so let's revisit what we're talking about. We talked about BluePoint's game, Horizon, possibly a Splinter Cell, and Silent Hill. Okay, so those four things alone would mean that this is like one of the biggest game launch reveal presentations in the history of video games. We know Sony won't have all this because that would be a massive hype. Well, it can't be that hyped. It can't be. So let's be realistic. There's probably not going to be. There's not going to be a Splinter Cell game. We're probably not. I think we're fanboying a little too much there. Silent Hill. I mean, I
think it's realistic.
You've convinced me, right? I could see that. I could see that being announced. I could see the lights go dark and the eerie Silent Hill music playing. I'm on board with that. I mean, that gets me on board with what you said. So what else is there now? Obviously, we've heard rumors about the next Gran Turismo, but I guess in recent times, the thought is now that the Gran Turismo Sport will just kind of get I don't want to say a port, but there'll be a PS5 iteration of that potentially, and I just dubbed it GT Sport Ultimate, which is the PS5 version of the same game. I mean, do you think that's realistic?
Yeah, I think Gran Turismo Sport is basically being positioned now as a game as a service. You want to transition it to your next hardware as often as you can. Obviously, we're just talking about one generation here, but I mean, the game is still getting updates now. It just recently got a car update, so it makes sense for Sony to, I guess you would call it an enhanced port. I wouldn't call it a remaster or anything like that.
Right.
But transition it to the PlayStation 5 with all the content that the current version has, but you now introduce ray tracing, native 4K, 120 frames a second option for those with the monitor that support it, and all of those things to enhance the experience. Maybe now you can actually implement meaningful VR, because we did have Drive Club VR on the PlayStation 4, and I mean, a lot of people who played it did get headaches or they suffered from motion sickness simply because the resolution wasn't high enough. But now with the PlayStation 5, you should be able to deliver a crisp, clear VR solution for a Gran Turismo Sport.
Yeah.
So you include that extra type of mode. And I mean, now basically from what was just said, that sounds like an entirely new game compared to what we have right now. And then you just continue to promise new rollout for new courses, new cars, and new content over an extended period of time. And I mean, whether or not it's at launch or within a launch window, that's a compelling piece of software.
Yeah, I agree. I think fans of racing game kind of expect to see something at the show. I mean, I think we'll see the Codemasters games as well that they bring across. I think that'll be a part of the presentation. But yeah, I mean, Gran Turismo is one of those beloved franchises. I'm not a big racing game fan personally, but I prefer Gran Turismo over Forza. I've always felt like people aren't going to hate me, but I've always felt like the Forza kind of driving just felt a little not quite right for me, but Gran Turismo just nails the driving feeling for me. So I've always liked it. One thing that I heard recently, I don't know if this has any impact on anything, but I did hear that they just recently removed GT6 from the online store, so you can't actually get that anymore. I don't know if that has any bearing on this announcement or this kind of discussion, but Gran Turismo 6 is not available anymore other than physical copies, obviously, that you find.
Yeah, I never really read too much in those listing type of situations because it always seems like it's misguided. People lean into them and then it ends up not being anything that people had speculated or hyped. So I wouldn't read too much into that because that would suggest that the sport line was really just a one-off type release and that they still want to continue the mainline series, which they very well could.
Yeah.
Like, I can't dismiss the idea of GTA 6 coming or GT6 coming to PlayStation 5 or even a Gran Turismo 7. Certainly can't discount the possibility. I just think it makes more sense for them to use Gran Turismo Sport as a game as a service and just, transition it to the next generation, as often as possible, as long as you continue to provide updates and new cars and such. It's one of those games that you can just, have it going forever. And as long as you're charging for those new cars with microtransactions of some sort, it's a infinite money well, as long as the base remains engaged. And the fact that they're still putting out new cars on the PlayStation 4 this summer suggests to me that there is an active playing base.
Yeah, absolutely. What about backward compatibility? They're going to show something here. Now, I don't think they're necessarily going to spend too much time talking about it, but I think they're going to at least say, and you can bring X number of PS4 games across to the PS5 on launch day, right? We heard the number 100, back when Jim Ryan was talking after the Sony presentation. But, we're hearing now that they're trying to get everything prepared. So pretty much any PS4 game will come across. Do you think they show, I'll say, Ghosts and Last of Us Part 2 and maybe I don't know, some other some other game, maybe an Uncharted 3 or something, where they show how they run on the PS5 at all?
Oh man, I think
And I mean
they're going to
Uncharted 4,
mention,
by the way, not Uncharted 3.
right, Uncharted.
I
Uncharted 3
I
is
wish it was Uncharted 3.
Uncharted 3 is on the PlayStation 4 in the Uncharted collection.
Well, that is true, yeah.
So it technically is right, but I do think they make mention of backwards compatibility in passing, and I think they show us a list, showcasing a dozen or so games, saying here's some of the PlayStation 4 games you can play on PlayStation 5 on launch day. And we had that story that came out that said every game that's released in July and after on PlayStation 4 has to be compatible with PlayStation 5, which would include Ghost of Tsushima.
Yep.
But it would not include The Last of Us Part 2 if we take that as a literal fact, as July is the date. Then I would say, like, okay, here's that list, and then you ended at the bottom, and more to come.
Right.
I don't think we see a backwards compatibility demonstration at the show, though. I think it's just mentioned, list, moved on.
Yeah. Well, Jim Ryan hates backward compatibility. I mean, he's never been a big fan of it. He probably doesn't even want to talk about it.
He's made that very clear that he does not like backwards compatibility, especially when he made the comments about Gran Turismo 1 on PlayStation 1 and said, who would want to play this?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you said this right around the time you were preparing a PlayStation 1 classic. Like, that's, like, come on, Jim.
I feel like they maybe talk a little more about it than what you said. Probably not too much, but I'm kind of going into this thinking along the lines of, again, we want to hit you with the haymaker. We want you to buy the PS5. We don't want to leave any doubt in your mind. This is the console for you. So I think they do show a little more than that with backward compatibility, but maybe not necessarily say the words backward compatibility. You know what I'm saying? Because I think that that is not necessarily a great marketing term, but if they say, and you can bring your PS4 collection across to the PS5 on launch day, and then show a couple of, and everything will be up-resed and look really cool, and we've added HDR on certain games, and they show I guess a sizzle reel of some stuff. I think that's pretty compelling.
You think they're going to go as far as what Microsoft is doing with backwards compatibility, where we had Microsoft come out last week and they said, we're going to add HDR, we're going to increase performance on titles that were originally 30 frames a second, dating back all the way to the Xbox 360, and even Xbox One. You're going to get a boost to 60 frames a second. Some games are going to go from 60 to 120. You're going to get those resolution boosts as well, HDR implementation. Do you think Sony can compete with what Microsoft is doing when it comes to backwards compatibility?
No, definitely not. And they're not going to magically, up-res and up the frame rate on every single game. But I think maybe some selected titles, and Ghosts is one of those, where they may add those enhancements because it kind of makes sense. I don't think so. I don't think Sony is anywhere near in the same ballpark. And we've talked about this before with backward compatibility. I mean, Sony has no answer to the Xbox 360 backward compatibility for the PlayStation 3. That just doesn't exist on their ecosystem right now. They don't seem interested in the PS2, and they don't seem interested in the PS1, at least for launch. That may change later on, but right now, I think they'll your PS4 games will come across. They'll natively upscale to whatever display your television's at. You may get some enhancements, some HDR. It depends on the game, of course, but other than that, no, they're not even competing with Microsoft.
What I am curious about is how Sony is going to approach games. We'll use Last of Us 2 as an example, just because it doesn't make that July cutoff date that they put out, even though the cutoff can be arbitrary. Would you say games like Ghost of Tsushima, it's beyond that date, so it has to be there by their own rules? That, to me, means Ghost of Tsushima is not going to get a PlayStation 5 enhanced version later down the line, whereas that leaves the possibility of The Last of Us 2 remaster like we saw on PlayStation 4 of the first game, where maybe we can get the native 4K with that enhanced just PlayStation 5 only release. And with Sony approaching backwards compatibility, you think they're going to look at the games that they're going to include on that and say, well, we want to remaster this title, so we're not going to include it because we want that extra, $40 or $60 from a double dip. But we're not too concerned about those games late in the generation, like a Ghost of Tsushima, only because, well, it came on the verge of PlayStation 5's introduction. It may look a little shady if we already put it out, within a year of release, a better PlayStation 5 version. So we'll allow, one-time sales, because with the introduction of PS5, maybe I didn't own a PS4 and Ghost of Tsushima looks, enticing. So I'm going to buy that knowing I can play it on my PS5.
Yeah, I think the difference here is that, the PS3 wasn't compatible, or, the PS4 wasn't backward compatible with the PS3. So you kind of had that kind of line drawn in the sand where you couldn't cross it, unless there was a remaster or a port or a remake done. Last of Us on the PS3 was remastered for the PS4 because there was no other way. You know what I'm saying? Like,
True.
I think, I'm not saying that's not going to happen this time around, because, the PS4 has been around for a long time. Some of those early games could potentially be brought back, and, there could be some type of infamous collection that gets made or something. Ooh. You can't rule out, the earlier stuff that came out for the PS4 that gets brought back. I could see that, but I think things are a little different now with, with the, I guess, the architectures being a lot closer together than they were when it was the PS4 and the PS3.
Right, yeah. As you brought up, like, the earlier games, whether it be the infamous, you do like a double pack on PlayStation 5 where you've enhanced everything. Like, I think of the neon lights in Infamous Second Son, and I throw that into, good HDR with some ray tracing, and the entire atmosphere of that city life is completely transformed now into something you would look at and be like, wow. Or I even think of a title like The Order 1886.
Dude, I love that game.
Wait, you remaster that on the
incredible.
PlayStation 5. Wow.
Dude, I'm not trolling. I really like that game a lot. I get it. It's a 4-hour game, a 5-hour game, and it's a lot of quick time events.
No replay value.
But man, it's fun as hell. They should definitely bring that game back.
I'd love to see them return to that game, because when the game came out, I played it. I was like, I really enjoyed playing this. The only problem is you couldn't skip the cutscenes. So if I wanted to replay it, it was going to take me just as long as it did my first time through, because you couldn't even speed run it because there was no way to speed up certain areas. And I hated the idea that the game gave you the thermite gun.
Yeah.
But you could only use it for 20 minutes.
That's right.
It's like you just got this badass gun. Yeah. Shoot down that ladder with it. Okay. You can't use the gun anymore. What? Had that game had a horde mode.
Yes.
It would have changed the entire perception of the title. So if they ever return to it and they had Ready at Dawn say, hey guys, we want you to remaster The Order 1886, and we're going to give you time to, maybe add some of the content you guys were actively developing that we, simply didn't have time to get the game out at the time with. And that happens, give that game a second chance and prep a sequel. Man, that game, that game is still a visual showcase on PlayStation 4. You bring that to PS5 with all those bells and whistles, and wow, I can't even fathom what that game could look like on that engine.
It'd be ridiculous. So there's one game on my list that I struggle with, but I've got it written down, and I want your opinion. Do you think Bloodborne 2 has any part of this show?
No. As much as it pains me, no.
I looked at the sales. It sold about 3 million, which I know it started out pretty slow, but it's kind of one of those cult following games now that people absolutely adore. Yeah, it's hard for me to think that there'll be a Demon's Souls and a Bloodborne 2 in the same presentation. But man, I wish it was. Right. I guess I'm kind of fanboying again. I'd love to see it, but yeah, it seems unlikely, doesn't it?
Yeah, it seems unlikely. I think the Demon's Souls remake or remaster, however they want to market it, would cater to that audience. And we know that From Software and Miyazaki is currently busy on Elden Ring. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I'd want a sequel to Bloodborne being made without at least his guidance or input. I'd definitely want him directly, giving feedback into such a project. But if, if the Demon Souls project is getting feedback from him, and that can be a launch game or a launch window game, that would probably fill that need. But Bloodborne is definitely an IP I want Sony to return to this generation with a sequel, because I've seen the Digital Foundry footage where they have Bloodborne running at 60 frames a second, and the game is so smooth and fast at 60 frames a second. It's almost like a completely different game when you watch the combat video.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when I watched that Digital Foundry video, I was like, wow, look at that game.
Yeah,
it's so
incredible.
smooth and fluid. And
I agree. It's
so.
Yeah, I guess probably not the right time to bring that out, but hopefully they
Right.
do revisit that game, because 60 frames Bloodborne game on PS5. I mean, I think a lot of people would be really hyped for that.
I guess, this would go back to our topic just, a couple of minutes ago. What's preventing them from remastering Bloodborne from PlayStation 4 for a PlayStation 5 release with 60 frames a second, 4K resolution, and all the extra SSD, ray tracing, etc. I could see that happening sometime this generation. It just wouldn't be shown at this event.
Well, that brings up an interesting point. Is it a remaster or is it just a patch? Because I guess, Microsoft has their smart delivery, right? And one question that I've heard is, well, are we going to see what Sony has for smart delivery? But see, I've struggled with this smart delivery thing. I know we talked about this in a previous episode, but for me, what is smart delivery? I mean, isn't it just you put your disc in the drive or you download it, and it just pulls in the appropriate patches for the console that you're on? So I would see Bloodborne, let's say Bloodborne is one of the day one backward compatibility games on the PS5. If there was a way to unlock the frame rate and we'll say an upscale patch to bring it to 4K native, I'd be pretty happy with both of those things. Is that really a remaster at that point, or is it just hey, this is a patch?
I guess the way you described the Bloodborne situation there, of like if it's backwards compatible, I put it in, it gets a patch, and it adds 60 frames a second and increases the, upscales the resolution. I guess you would just call that's just a patch. It's still Bloodborne. It'd be more akin to what we've seen from the Final Fantasy 13 trilogy on the Xbox One X, where it completely redoes the texture work and everything in the background. It almost makes it like a completely new game. It actually does a better job than some remasters we've seen from some companies, the way it treats the character models, the backgrounds, and everything, even the performance. It's really transformed the entire game. The thing with Smart Pass, from my understanding, is like CD Projekt Red, I think, put out the clearest example or description of it is, if I buy it on the Xbox One and I do put it in my Xbox Series X, it does actually give me access to the Xbox Series X version. Mm-hmm. So it's not just patching in higher res assets to the Xbox One version. It's actually giving me the next gen version. I think it's still one of those things we have to really see in practice to understand. Yeah. I guess you would say the difference between the two versions.
So what you're saying is, somewhere on Microsoft's cloud, on their Azure servers, there's literally, and this is a really simplified way of thinking about it, but there's different folders, right? Folder structures on their hard drive for here's the VCR version, here's the 1X version, here's the Series X version, and it's literally just pulling from that targeted version based on the console information that's being sent to to the cloud, right?
I think it's something like that, or it might be more similar to what we have seen, like with last gen. Like if I bought a PS3 version of Madden and I put it in the PS4, and I had to give over $10 to it, and it upgraded me to the PS4 version. Yeah, I think it's something like that. There's just no cost.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, but it's weird. Sony hasn't really detailed anything about that for themselves, even for third-party games. They've been quiet on that. If they do have something similar, I would expect it at this event. Yeah. So, hopefully it is an initiative for Sony, because it does seem like a very smart one for Microsoft to, take advantage of, and for publishers to take advantage of. Now, we've talked about a lot of, I would say, Western third parties, but we haven't touched on Japanese third parties that could show up at the show.
Right. So, yeah, that's a good point. We could see, the next Bandai Namco with a new Tekken game, or there's a lot of, Tekken's always been a big Sony franchise as well. It's been part of the PlayStation since the first PlayStation, of course. So there could be a new Tekken game that gets announced. That would be kind of cool. There could be some Persona stuff that comes up. That part for me is where I struggle a little bit to think about what could come. What are your thoughts on this part?
I was thinking really of two main Japanese companies, and they are Sony's good friends, Square Enix and Capcom.
So you're thinking, well, yeah, I mean, I guess the next Resident Evil game would be a possibility. Resident Evil 8, yes. I'm guessing, would be something. And we've heard some stories about that, but so Square Enix. So are you saying that we'll see a teaser of the next Final Fantasy 7 remake?
I would not Final Fantasy 7. I think it's time for us to get a teaser of Final Fantasy 16.
Ooh, that would be good.
I think it's time for them to do it. It may not happen at this event, but I would not be surprised if Sony has it at least during their summer of events that they have told us about. But I think if they really want to appeal to that worldwide market, because a lot of the games we talked about so far are Western focused, you still have to sell the system in Japan, and what better company and what better franchise than Square with Final Fantasy? And if they show us a 2-3 minute teaser trailer of Final Fantasy 16, that's a really hype moment. It doesn't even have to be exclusive to the platform.
Yeah.
It's just the fact that you had it first as a marketing tool, because we're not going to get a new Kingdom Hearts anytime soon. Final Fantasy 7 Chapter 2 is probably still 2-3 years off, but we haven't had a mainline Final Fantasy continuation in a number of years. So I think we could see Final Fantasy 16 show up at Sony's event. I think Capcom can come in with Resident Evil 8. And you brought up Tekken as a fighter, and I was kind of thinking, what if Street Fighter 6 shows up?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a possibility as well. We just haven't heard anything from the Street Fighter camp, and usually Yoshihiro Ono will say something. He'll tease something about the next Street Fighter game, or you'll hear from the Capcom PR people maybe saying, we're thinking about the next Street Fighter, but they don't really say anything beyond that. So we haven't really heard anything about the next Street Fighter other than the Champion Edition Street Fighter on Street Fighter 5. But I mean, it would be a good platform to tease or reveal the next iteration of Street Fighter. It would be a pretty big announcement for sure.
Yeah, usually we see Ono on social media showing Blanca next to, something like he'll put it against the number 5 and be like,
"Yep,
wait a minute, what is that supposed to mean?" Like, he likes to social media tease when there's an announcement coming, and we haven't seen that yet. But I think it would be nice if they did come out with a Street Fighter 6 at the event, just because Street Fighter 5 was such a botched delivery. Even if the core game was good in terms of fighting mechanics, the rollout was so bad in those early years that when they finally did fix all those issues, people had moved on to other fighting games. And I mean, Street Fighter 5 still has a very committed user base. There's a lot of people who have now enjoyed Street Fighter 5. But when I think of fighting games, especially something that could show up at the PlayStation 5 event, it really comes down to Tekken, Street Fighter, and that's really it, because I don't think we see a new iteration of Dead or Alive anytime soon. I
doubt we'll see Dead or Alive. I think it's one of those.
But now this is going to be fanboying a bit. What if we see a Ninja Gaiden?
Ooh.
It's been a while.
Yeah, that would be a pretty big announcement. That would be a great announcement if they could do that. I mean that's possible. It's possible.
Yeah. I mean, when I think of Ninja Gaiden, I don't really associate it to the PlayStation brand, especially because when Ninja Gaiden really made its modern resurrection, it was on the Xbox line of consoles with Ninja Gaiden, then Ninja Gaiden Black, Ninja Gaiden 2. The PlayStation version eventually got Ninja Gaiden, it got Ninja Gaiden 2 Sigma and so forth. It came to the PlayStation Vita as well. Then Ninja Gaiden 3 came out, and that was terrible. And then they did Razor's Edge, which was for a while a Wii U exclusive.
Yep.
And we haven't had we had Ninja Gaiden. What was the indie one? Yaba Gaiden or Yaba.
Yes. Yeah. That one wasn't actually that bad.
It wasn't that bad. It just wasn't that good either.
Yeah.
And I mean, I feel like the time is right for a new Ninja Gaiden, but maybe not at Sony's event. Maybe Microsoft was able to secure that as part of their big Japanese game initiative, and it shows up in July, which I'd still be hyped for it.
Yes.
So okay, what else from Japan could we see? Sega.
I think we'll see something from Sega. I don't necessarily know what that would entail. That there was that Humankind game that they teased last year. Maybe we'll get to see a little more of that. See what that looks like potentially. But it's hard to really know what Sega's cooking right now, especially with that kind of vague announcement that they're going to change the landscape of video games with some announcement that's we're still waiting to hear on. But yeah, I would say, anything that revolves around some type of Sonic game, or maybe they bring back a beloved franchise, but it's hard for me to see what Sega has at the moment. They're being so vague with stuff, and that whatever they do drop, it's not going to be absolutely mind-blowing, but I could see them maybe showing off more of the Humankind stuff, or maybe the next Sonic game which is what I think that this reveal will ultimately be. I think it's Sonic Adventure 3 personally. So maybe, we see something along those lines.
What about a Virtua Fighter?
I thought about Virtua Fighter, but I don't know, man. Like, look, I love Virtua Fighter, but what would really pop at a Sony show? Would it be a Tekken or a Street Fighter, or would it be a Virtua Fighter? And I don't think Virtua Fighter makes the cut. Even if it is a game that is a part of their plans, I can't see it at this show. Right. Yeah.
Now, I'm kind of not really expecting Sega in any meaningful way.
Right.
And I mean, in all truth, the PlayStation brand, while it is a worldwide brand, when you think of Sony's first party output and even some of the third party games that they really, go after, they're really more of a Western focus than that heavy Japanese focus. And that's where I can really only see Square Enix with a Final Fantasy game really being that title, be like, hey, Japan, we're still thinking about you. But we need that Resident Evil 8. We need that Horizon Zero Dawn. We need those type of games because we want to sell this system in North America and Europe, in more Western, more Western areas. But Japan, we still love you. We're still going to have the games you want to play. We're still going to have Atlas on board, even if we don't have them at this event per se.
Mm-hmm.
So it does. It sounds like, I think our expectations and predictions so far have been mostly grounded. I mean, I'd say our really only fanboyisms have been, Splinter Cell and
Bloodborne.
Ninja Gaiden.
Yeah.
Bloodborne.
So we haven't talked about what closes out the show. I have a particular game that I think is going to close out the show. Ooh. It's not going to come out this year, but it's one of those things that they tease.
So my mind goes to two titles. And if I'm Sony and I don't care about being timely with when this game comes out, I just want to reveal it to get people excited, I would choose God of War. Mm-hmm. But my gut instinct is Spider-Man 2, but I don't know if closing on Spider-Man 2 is really a high note. I think I would throw Spider-Man 2 somewhere in the middle of the presentation where I want to show off the SSD and how vast the city can be. So that's where I would have to return to closing with God of War.
Yeah. I think the only parts we differ is the opening and closing of the show. I think it will close with Spider-Man 2. I totally get what you're saying about, maybe showing off the SSD and the smooth streaming of assets into the system itself. But I think they're going for look, God of War was a massive game for them, but I think Spider-Man 2 makes more sense from my perspective that they would close the show out with. And yeah, right, I don't think it's anything that's coming anytime soon. In fact, I would say that Spider-Man 2 is probably a 2021 game, and I would say God of War. And the only reason why I don't think they're going to show God of War is because I think that's a 2022 game. So I think that's a pretty hard sell to say coming 2022, in the middle of 2020, right? I mean, that's a pretty hard sell for me. And a lot of people would be like, okay, well, that was cool, but now we've got to wait at least 18 months plus whatever time the game needs for crunch. So that's the only reason why I don't think God of War will close the show out.
Yeah, and as we kind of touched on the video when Jeff Grubb joined us, Sony wants to do more of these shows this year, and they still have like the State of Play, and they have the PSX type events. So you don't really need to show your long-term plans as if you only have one event a year, or even 2 events a year if we want to say E3 and Tokyo Game Show. Now you have basically as many events as you want with the State of Play presentations. If you want to have it every other month, you can. So you don't have to show games that are coming out in 2022 or 2023 right now. You can wait 6 months and do it then. And knowing that Sony does have additional things planned for this summer, you definitely don't want to go overboard with this first showcase. You definitely want to have that strong showing, though.
Yeah.
And then when you have the second one, you can show a little more hype. You can get people excited about the future. And then when you get closer to launch, like a September State of Play, you rein it back in for launch with a tease of something that's still beyond the horizon to get people excited about what's coming maybe in late 2021.
Wait, wait. You said beyond the horizon? Is that a clue? Are you supposed to?
No, it is not. It's just a phrase.
Okay. just clarifying.
I will leave with one tease. A Sony franchise is going to make a return on the PlayStation 5, but in a new form.
Ooh. I'll have to think about that. So Ape Escape as a strategy game?
That's the only hint I will give.
Okay.
And I think it is at the event. I'm not 100% certain. But if it is, I'll let it be known when we do our recap episode. And I think that's how I'll end this discussion today. Make people think a little bit.
Well, I'll definitely be looking and seeing what they have for us. I'm curious to see what that could be. I'll definitely give it some thought before the
and
show starts.
It's not knack. It's not knack.
No, I didn't think it was knack.
I'll say that much. It's not knack. Hopefully this doesn't turn into a thread anywhere. Don't need that. But as always, thank you for joining me once again, MVG.
Always a pleasure. It's great to spitball with you about this, and we'll have to see how well we did when this show actually occurs.
Yeah, well, I have my notes here written of everything that was said. So when the event shows up, I'll put some check marks next to what we hit and X's to what we missed, and we'll see if we batted over 80% or not. And for everyone listening, if you enjoyed this episode, give the video a like. If you didn't, give it a dislike. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment in the comment section below, letting us know your thoughts on the Sony event coming up and some of your predictions. And until next time, continue to embrace the hate.